Kate, by some estimates, the city is several $billion in deferred road maintenance. You alluded to the pension, unfunded pension amounts. Parks is several $100 million behind. How do you believe that we can get caught up with this?
My plan at the, I outlined where I think our general fund is completely out of whack. So we've got $170 million going just towards healthcare expenses for the 10,000 city employees. My belief is that we should just move towards aligning with Obamacare, which says that employees should not be paying more than 9.5% of their salaries towards healthcare expenses. So I think if we begin to transition from government as 100% provider of a Cadillac set of benefits and move more towards wellness management on the employee side, and then just getting the employees to begin to pay as we do each contract as it comes up over time. If we just align with Obamacare, we'll be fine. We cannot stay on the trajectory we're on. We'll be spending in 10 years 40% of the general fund on just healthcare benefits for the city employees. So I intend to introduce that concept. I intend to introduce the idea. I know that King County is doing a much better job than Seattle with the wellness management of their employees. But they've got a lot of work to do in terms of getting the employees to contribute to their health care. My husband and I pay $800 a month for our health care for us and our 2 children. It costs $400 per person per month for health care. So everyone needs to start participating in that. If we ever become a socialized medicine society, we'll all be paying that in taxes. So I just say start now. Get everybody, private sector, public sector, everybody contributing about the same amounts to their health care. So there's more of a blurring between what's a public job and what's a private job. So yeah, I just would like to see us get real in terms of what our personal responsibilities are for our benefits.
What's your opinion of the electing city council members by district?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. I personally think that we do need to have representation. We do need it by districts. Personally, I think we need by-district representation at the city council level. I spoke to Steve Zemke the other night, and he gave me some interesting insight. I spoke to, I probably asked about 50 people about it so far. I think that it has some weakness in the way that we would be electing only by district. So my feeling is the school board system of first you run in the primary with the district and then you run citywide for the general is a better idea in my opinion. Just that gets you supported by your neighborhood and then supported citywide, but just having elections by district in the general feels like we would have perhaps just factions trying to run the city, and that doesn't seem quite right. With the school board, you are elected and you represent everyone, but you have to get into it through your district, and I would prefer something a bit in that direction.
Can you clarify when you talk about the importance of micro districts, about businesses needing parking, yet you say retail is not the answer?
Well, let me just say that we have basic retail that we need to support a neighborhood. You know, that would be just the basic stores that you need to run your life. Those stores cannot be successful without parking. And so I've watched, and it doesn't have to be a lot of parking, it could be just a little teaser lot, but it needs to be there, because without it, you're going to struggle with businesses. So I would like to see us not be so hardline about parking that we prevent businesses from being successful.
It's actually the second part of that question was the more important part.
Okay.
Because you had said at one point, well, retail is not the answer.
Right.
But
so
what forms the focus of a micro district if not retail?
So what I meant to clarify there is that Seattle just keeps building gigantic areas of retail, and we have no residential to support that, and so it really becomes kind of a cannibalistic deal where you open this and put them out of business, or open this and put them out of business, or just cannibalistic basically. But we've kind of gotten our patterns around these mixed-use development with way, way too much retail for what we actually need. And so the city does that because they want to get those sales tax revenues from retail. But retail has a very limited potential in terms of growing an economy. If you look at other industries that we could be bringing in to bring real jobs to our neighborhoods and to our people, you get to look upstream and downstream of what the impacts of those businesses are. You see that industries, just like in this context that we're in right now, there's all sorts of suppliers that are upstream from the industry. Lots of jobs and jobs that pay are created. When you look at a retail situation, especially the bigger the box gets, there's really nobody in our community upstream that's benefiting from that at all. And again, downstream, it's just putting out a business that actually may have some network of effect beyond, or a ripple effect beyond who they are. But the bigger the box gets, the less that is as well. So I'm just interested in real jobs, industries that have an upstream effect and a downstream effect, and retail is not that.
Why build sidewalks east of 125th and Greenwood when the roadway east of 105th and Greenwood is in tatters?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point. I know this question that, oh, Gloria, nice. It's not Gloria? Okay, that's a great question. Yes, so the basic walkable infrastructure is largely getting ignored. This is when I served on the Pedestrian Master Plan Advisory Group. The fact that we came out of there without a solid plan for building out the network of sidewalks was just very unfortunate. I have a plan for along the arterials and the bus routes. That's where the city needs to be putting their money and leveraging them with private dollars to get those arterials and bus routes fully sidewalked. Outside of that, in the private, on the residential streets, just a further word about sidewalks. I worked on a planning project that I wrote a couple of years back. It's in up until about 2009. And it involved how do we get the sidewalks finished without the government being Santa Claus. Okay, the government, by the way, has never been Santa Claus on the sidewalks. It's always been paid for by the landowners. And so what I went out and did was figured out a way that the government can leverage the property owners to do their own sidewalks without rolling them out. So I think the sidewalks could be completed by starting with the blocks that are ready to pay, which are many. Start out by the government rolling out the intersections and having the private property owners just follow the rules we already have for improving the right-of-way using a street use permit and private funds.
How are you going to address the loss of low-income housing? How would you suggest that we deal with homelessness and despair? And how do we avoid then making Seattle a magnet for more people in need?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem. Like, if we're not on par with the other municipalities on dealing with homelessness, it's that we don't need to attract homelessness from everywhere. We need to think about dealing with all the other governments and having a plan together. Beyond that, I think that we have to, as we do, just differentiate what is the root of the homelessness, because we lump everything into a homelessness basket, but there's so many different reasons for homelessness, some of them more easily solved than others. I think that with just people that have just economically been thrown out by the recession, I think there's quite a bit we can do on that. People that have substance management issues and mental health issues, that's a whole other set of supports that we need to be offering. I think that the tent cities concept is good, but I think we need to begin to with more permanent solutions in that instead of a tent. I've been thinking, again, I'm going to bring this back to a little bit of a personal example. I have an alley in back of my house. I have a trailer that I take out camping in the summer. I ran utilities up there so that I can go out there and use it, or when I want to get away from anybody in my house. And then a couple of winters ago, I had a vendor from Real Change who was, she was just completely freezing and living in her car in front of several of our houses, kind of safe places that we had. And I made my trailer available to her to get through the worst part of the winter. It was totally workable and safe. And so I think that, again, personal responsibility, what can we do? How can we get some policies together to have us be able to help people? Those kind of solutions I'd like to see us explore. I think that the problem's not going to go away, and humane solutions that each of us participate in is the way to go.
Do you believe in sustainability, do you believe that sustainability is really possible, or should we as a city be focused on resiliency, that is, capable to withstand upcoming pressures from climate change, population growth, peak oil, etc.?
One more time, Bill.
Do you believe sustainability is really possible, or should we as a city be focused on resiliency, that is, being capable to withstand upcoming pressures from climate change, population growth, peak oil, etc.?
Yeah, I think they're kind of the same. I mean, I don't think of those as two different things. I think what happens with sustainability is sometimes we forget that it's the three-legged stool, the people, planet, profits aspect of sustainability. We tend to always be skewing towards the environmentally sustainable, but sustainable is socioculturally sustainable, economically sustainable, and environmentally sustainable. So I see that, so I don't see that, I see them as one concept that we're working on. I happen at this time, I think the time is right for us to think about socioeconomic sustainability, especially. I just, honestly, if we can't get at the front end of it and get some jobs that pay, the trajectory we're on with basically non-livable wages, I call them food stamp jobs, that basically you work, but you can't be independent. That's just complete oppression. I think as we're reaching out, it's a little bit of a diversion on this question, but I'll say it while I have it in my mind. We have to be really careful with what we call social safety nets and separating that from oppression. Because what I've seen, I think many of you know, but I'm Mexican by marriage. I'm married to a Mexican immigrant. My family on my Mexican side suffers quite a bit. But I find that the programs we're often putting out there that are supposed to help them are just causing more oppression. So it's education, front-end education, and getting jobs that pay so people can be independent is where I put my emphasis.
How would you address the need for more police officers in parts of the city?
Yes, that's really, for just a detailed view of where I want to head with the police department, I have a white paper on my website about SPD Reform, and I encourage you to look at the details of that. But meanwhile, so let's start at the beginning. We didn't need the Justice Department to tell us that we need to reform SPD. It's been a disaster for as long as anyone can remember. So to just begin with, I would like to have a very strong, perhaps even authoritarian chief to replace Diaz. Not that I think Diaz is a bad person, he's a really nice guy, but I don't think he's what we need to reel in the department. So I'd like a new chief. I think the commanders underneath the chief also need some revisions, so hopefully the new chief could take care of that. And then we just need massive professional development of the 1,300 cops that we have, because it's been like 8 years since any of them have been trained on so many of the most important things like domestic violence, where we really need cops to know how to handle these situations. Domestic violence is not nothing. Domestic violence is gigantic, and it's affecting the people that are living in the poor neighborhoods of Seattle terribly. So I want to get the police force professionally developed to the point where they can handle these situations and all the other situations where we're having trouble. The whole penchant for racism escalating emotions on situations where our cops should be so much more capable of reeling these situations in and defusing them. So that will be the professional development part of it. Then, because my first thought was we need more cops, which I do believe we need more cops. I mean, we're 300 short of the San Francisco ratio, we're 1,000 short of the New York City ratio. I think we need cops. But just, my policy is fix what we've got first before we add more money to it. So let's get the police department reformed, and then let's get the cops out. This hotspot policing, the problem with the idea, that's a good idea, but the problem is that there's all sorts of hidden, invisible things that are hotspots that the cops don't get thrown at. So I look forward to, I personally feel that our city attorney has a fantastic bead on what the police department reform looks like. So as mayor, I feel confident that working with Pete Holmes to get the police department right and get the right cops out into the neighborhood and get this basic service of public safety equitably distributed across the city is something I can achieve.
He's talked to the issue of apartments, the micro apartments. Do you believe that there should be a minimum residential unit size in residential zones?
I think that I know apartments or micro living units. I don't have a solidified platform plank on it, but I have a few thoughts. I think that we don't have a reference to look back to say if they're a bad thing. I mean, I know they're making people upset, but the reality is the new normal looks a lot different than the old normal. So I think smaller living units make sense. However, what does a family-size apartment look like? How can we, right now downtown, all the developers just want to make one-bedroom units because that's the most profitable for them. But it makes it again, Seattle just builds these monocultures of this kind of people live here. So in the apartment thing, I think the buildings should have some micro units in them, but I'm not sure that building entire buildings of micro units makes sense. And just like renting a room in your house, give somebody a place to live for much less money than they would pay for an apartment. I think that's sustainable to have little places like that, tuck them in. But again, concentration's probably not the right direction to go.
Can you talk a little bit to historic preservation? The Good Shepherd Community Center was a national landmark, but now it appears to be headed towards development for profit and at the expense of loss to the community. Are you familiar with that issue?
I am not very familiar with that issue. I'm not going to be able to come forth with a great answer for that right now.
Are you in favor of development impact fees?
Yeah, impact fees and incentives to get the goodies that we want out of development. I think it's great. But let's go back a little bit here. We're talking about, let's just go down to Lake Union for a second here. Talk about towers or no towers? That's the big question. Towers or no towers? And I think to myself, I've seen some great towers across the world. I've also seen entire cities like Barcelona or Paris that have no towers at all, or just the Eiffel. So towers are not a necessity by any stretch of the imagination. If we're going to have towers, what are we going to get from a tower? So if our zoning height is, 5 stories or whatever, 6 stories, 8 stories, 10 stories, whatever it is, I could see getting some of the goodies we need out of that height. We couldn't do it everywhere, but I think we can get some of them. And I think user fees make sense. If you're building all these buildings and you're consuming our capacity with the sewers, or you're, expending our capacity with the parks we have, or the seats at the school, I think that impact fees make sense. But we haven't outlined them sufficiently and figured out an equitable way to roll them out. So both the incentives and the user fees, I think it makes sense.
Nonprofits are really corporations, and many have members on city boards and commissions. This does not leave room for average citizens and individuals to serve on these city boards. You see the need for the makeup of the boards to be different than what's currently being done. How would you propose doing that?
Yes, I am. I feel very strongly about that. I do not like what I see at all with nonprofits acting like citizens at the tables of these organizations. So, not that I'm not in favor of some nonprofits, but I have to say nonprofits are, if you think the government is not transparent enough, take a look at nonprofits and realize how out of your view all of that is. I've seen it in my own neighborhood. We have to draw a line and say this is a corporation. Their heart may be in the right place, it may not be. When we talk about Citizens United, of people getting upset about, corporations being able to be people, for sure the nonprofits apply in that category. I think we have to be very, very cautious.
The city's considering measures on how to deal with the Parks Department. There's discussion of a Metropolitan Parks Board, perhaps a Parks Levy. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I haven't come to a conclusion. I've been studying over the last couple of weeks different ways that we could keep the Parks Department going. I'm kind of going to backtrack to my other thought here. I think we need to do things smarter and cheaper, and we need to leverage way more citizen involvement in the Parks Department. I know there's this union that prevents this participation and this reason why this can't participate, but I think we need to break that down because the new normal just doesn't really allow for those kind of barriers to people participating. I think that the number of things that we allow volunteers to participate in is way too small, and I'd like to see us open that up. I just don't think that the Parks Department operations is manageable on the level it's in, and I don't want to see us just throw funding at them to continue doing business the way they're doing it. I do think we have to throw funding at them, and let's clean it up first and then figure out sustainable funding.
The city is replacing fire stations. There's a good amount of other properties that the city is disposing of. Do you think that's the proper use of those? What would you use those properties for?
I'm sorry, so are you asking about liquidating properties or?
I'm trying to combine two questions into one. So it's the liquidation of properties, and then also for fire stations that are being disposed of. Are there other uses for those?
Yeah, I'm pretty uncomfortable with us letting go of properties because there can be some shifting of our assets over to the operations expense side, which is always bad accounting and bad fiscal management. So, as with the school district selling, Queen Anne High School for 10 cents on the dollar, and then leaving us high and dry with nothing, those same patterns exist at the city end. I don't think letting go of our assets makes sense. We can almost always get tenants into our assets to prevent us from losing money on those properties by the lease agreements that we make. So there may be good reasons occasionally to get rid of something and acquire something else that you need. If there's a definite sell this and buy this, that makes sense to me. Sell this and use the proceeds to pay expenses? No. We're going to continue growing. We're going to continue to need these facilities scattered around the city. We need to hang on to them.
Okay, this is a very technical question here, but this might be something you can handle. Green Lake is the most used park in the nation per capita. Is a dying lake in need of more fresh water to become a healthy lake again? The Parks Department has spent millions of dollars with chemical treatment, but fresh water is the answer. Currently, Maple Leaf is getting a new reservoir to provide necessary water and pressure for that growth area. This will allow the old reservoir to be used perhaps to divert fresh water back into Green Lake again, as it had before 1970s. This is an example of a lack of cooperation between two departments within the city that could solve problems, but will never happen because the left hand will not work or understand what the right hand is doing. How can things work differently for the better of Seattle? What changes need to happen?
Yeah, one of my platform priorities is cross-boundary collaboration. The whole silo operation is not going to work in the new normal. So ideas of cross-boundary collaboration, that's not just Seattle and outside groups, it's within Seattle. I mean, you could see all of the lack of collaboration that goes on in the right-of-way. In terms of the Green Lake situation, I might not quite say this right, but I think that Jan maybe told me at one point that Licton Springs used to, or was naturally, Licton Springs naturally provided fresh water for Green Lake. And then the city prevented that from happening with their pipe works. So I would think that with the whole opportunity we have for cross-boundary collaboration on that Wilson Pacific site, hopefully when the school district plans their schools on that site, I'm hoping the city will collaborate with them and make a community schools, all community hub on that site. Hopefully it will include daylighting Licton Springs, and then we can look forward to trying to connect it back to Green Lake so that we can get that system functioning again.
The water isn't too badly polluted, because part of the problem with Green Lake is some of the water sources that were good for it at one time became less good as you got your runoff in there and you start adding more oil and other things that go off the road. Many things that were helping purify Green Lake eventually became even worse than what was already there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last question. What is your position on the proposed sports arena? Should any city monies be spent on the project?
I'm against city money being spent on that project. I'm all for having a basketball arena and having a basketball team here. I think that we need those kind of things to move the city forward. As a planner, it makes no sense to me to try and put a planning process after decisions have been made. That just is a backwards process. If we had a super public process, maybe there would have been a way to publicly participate that didn't seem wrong to me. But right now, I think we've got a super wealthy hedge fund manager, super wealthy billionaires that are fully capable of pulling off this project with no government participation, and I have a very, very hard time in this new normal seeing us direct any public dollars to that. I'm super worried about threatening the good-paying jobs that we have at the port. I think that's very, very threatening. I think that we have to do a tremendous amount of work to make sure that the freight routes down in that port, in that Soto area work. I mean, have you driven on them? It's scary to think that these truckers trying to get in and out of here. If we want to have a port that can stay relevant in the future, those truckers have got to be able to get in and out of there. And I'm concerned enough about it that I think as we go forward, I'd like to see freight priority roadways that cars just can't move on in order to be able for those truckers to be able to get in and out of here and not go, I never want to drive that Port of Seattle again. You know, I'd like to see that.
All right. Well, thank you for coming and talking with us, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.